Prince William made a move that nobody inside the palace saw coming until it was already done. And the most shocking part wasn't even the financial freeze. It was where the entire story began. According to the story, the chain of events traced back to Camilla's former husband, Andrew Parker B.S., who allegedly walked into a private meeting with King Charles carrying something he'd kept for decades. Something that, once placed in front of the king, could no longer simply be ignored. And that is where this story really begins. Not with William, not with a dramatic confrontation inside the palace, but with a man from Camilla's past deciding that whatever he knew had finally reached the point where he could no longer keep it to himself. Before we break down exactly what happened, make sure you're subscribed to Crown Watch, because stories like this can change quickly. Now, let's go back to the beginning. The first visible sign that something had changed came in the form of a single memo. It circulated through the internal correspondence system on a Tuesday morning. Normally, a document like this would be read, filed away, and forgotten before the day was over. This one was different. Staff members reportedly read it twice. Some read it 3 times. Then they looked at one another with the kind of expression people have when they suddenly realize that something permanent has happened and nobody is going to explain it to them. The memo concerned Queen Camilla's household finances, her travel budget, her staffing allocations, her personal disbursement accounts, even the administrative infrastructure supporting the Queen Consort's office. Everything was being placed under immediate suspension pending what the document described as a review of expenditure. There was no timeline, no detailed explanation, and no indication of what would happen next. But then came the detail that changed everything. The authorization line at the bottom didn't carry Camilla's name. It didn't carry Charles's name either. It came from the office of the Prince of Wales. William had signed it himself. And the wording mattered. A review of expenditure is not an investigation. It doesn't automatically mean an accusation, and it doesn't create a public legal proceeding. On paper, it sounds almost painfully ordinary. But inside a royal household, where financial arrangements involving a queen consort would normally be handled with extraordinary care, the word review suddenly carried a much heavier meaning. By 9 that morning, the atmosphere inside the palace had changed. Conversations became shorter. Staff moved more carefully. Nobody seemed willing to say exactly what was happening. And then came the detail that made the silence even more noticeable. Camilla wasn't there. She had been scheduled to attend a routine charitable engagement that morning, the kind of appearance that normally generates little attention. Instead, it was canceled. Not postponed. Not rescheduled. Canceled. There was no public explanation. Her office remained closed. Her personal secretary reportedly arrived, checked the corridor, and left without entering. Then a member of her household staff went to collect her morning correspondence and found the tray untouched. According to the story, that was unusual. She had always collected it herself. One staff member reportedly remarked that in 20 years, they had never seen her leave it sitting there. Meanwhile, William had reportedly been seen leaving a private meeting with 2 legal advisors early that morning. By 8:15, the memo was circulating. By 9, the palace understood that something had happened that would be difficult to reverse. But nobody yet knew the most important part. Where had it really started? And who had given William the reason to act? The answer, according to the story, began the previous evening. King Charles already knew. Those closest to him reportedly noticed a change in his behavior that night. There was no dramatic confrontation, no raised voices, no visible breakdown. Instead, there was something much quieter. The kind of silence that comes when someone has been given information they can no longer unknow. Charles canceled his evening dinner. Normally, that might sound insignificant. A king's schedule changes constantly. But according to the story, the people who knew his routine understood that this particular meal was one of the few consistent rhythms he rarely abandoned. That night he did. The following morning, staff noticed another detail. Charles appeared composed. But it wasn't the calm of someone at peace with a decision. It was the stillness of someone who had already made a decision and now had to live with it. Catherine, meanwhile, said nothing publicly. That in itself wasn't unusual. But those who observed her closely reportedly noticed something different. She was attentive, correct, composed, and completely unreachable. The story presents that distance not as coldness, but as protection. Protection of William, protection of her children, and protection of the decision her husband had made. Princess and also appeared at a scheduled engagement that morning. She completed it as planned, but observers reportedly noticed that her interactions with staff were shorter than usual. Whether she knew the details of the memo or simply sensed the change moving through the household was never confirmed. But Anne had spent decades inside the institution. She knew how to read its silences. And this one, according to the story, was impossible to miss. The staff felt the pressure most directly. 2 members of Camilla's household office were reportedly told that their schedules had been suspended and that they should wait for further instructions. Those instructions never came. For nearly 2 hours, they reportedly remained in an anteroom without asking the question everyone was already thinking, because they understood that nobody was authorized to answer it. And yet, the most important detail was still unknown. The story hadn't actually begun inside the palace. It had begun 6 weeks earlier, with a private request, and with a man from Camilla's past. 6 weeks before the memo appeared, a message was reportedly passed through an intermediary. It didn't move through the usual official channels. It wasn't entered into the normal correspondence system, and it wasn't handled through the formal pathways designed to create a record of communications involving senior members of the royal household. Instead, the message reportedly traveled through a retired equerry, a man with decades of experience around royal service who knew both households well enough to understand the significance of what he was carrying. The message itself was simple. Andrew Parker BS wanted a private audience with King Charles. At first, that request wasn't necessarily extraordinary. The 2 men weren't strangers. Their worlds had overlapped for decades through military circles, country society, and formal occasions. They weren't close, but they weren't complete strangers either. What made this request different was one specific instruction. Andrew reportedly wanted the meeting kept off the official record. No diary entry, no staff present, no formal documentation of the conversation. For an institution where almost every significant interaction involving the king passes through some level of documentation, that was highly unusual. Charles agreed. And according to the story, those who later learned about the meeting described his decision as something between reluctance and inevitability, as if he understood that Andrew had reached the point where whatever he was carrying could no longer remain his burden alone. The meeting reportedly took place on a Wednesday afternoon at a private countryside residence. Not a royal residence, not a club, not anywhere officially connected to either man. It was a private house belonging to the retired equerry. What Andrew said during that meeting remained between the 2 men. But when Charles returned afterward, his staff reportedly noticed something in his expression. He wasn't visibly angry. He wasn't visibly shaken. It was something harder to describe. The look of a man who had just been handed something he recognized and had hoped he would never have to hold. Then Charles sent for Camilla. There was no formal diary entry, no elaborate arrangement, no traditional chain of communication. A single member of staff simply passed along the message that Charles wanted to speak with her. She arrived within the hour. The room was a small sitting room away from the working areas of the household. There was no desk, no formal seating arrangement designed to establish authority. Just 2 people, a quiet room, and a single document placed on a low table between them. Camilla looked at the document before she looked at Charles. It was reportedly a photocopy dated to the period immediately following her divorce from Andrew Parker BS, years before her marriage to Charles had been formally contemplated. According to the story, the document concerned a private financial arrangement. But there was something more troubling about it. The document allegedly suggested that Camilla had used knowledge acquired through her proximity to royal circles as leverage during a private negotiation. On its own, the document wasn't presented as proof of a criminal act. But in the context of public trust and royal conduct, it raised a much more complicated question. What does private behavior become when the person involved later occupies a position of enormous public responsibility? Charles didn't accuse her. Instead, he asked a single question. He asked her to help him understand what the arrangement had actually been. Then came silence. A long silence. And when Camilla finally spoke, she didn't deny the document. She didn't challenge its authenticity. Instead, she reframed it. She said the arrangement had been misunderstood, that the context had been lost. What appeared on the page as leverage, she argued, had simply been part of a private negotiation between two people trying to untangle a complicated shared life. Charles listened. He didn't interrupt. And when she finished, he didn't argue with her explanation. He asked about Andrew. Why had Andrew chosen to bring this forward now? Why, after all those years, had he decided to show Charles the document? That question changed the atmosphere in the room. And according to the story, Camilla's answer was revealing. She didn't say Andrew was lying. She didn't say the document was false. Instead, she asked a different question. Why would he do this to her? The meeting ended without a clear resolution. But perhaps that was the resolution. Charles didn't tell her what he planned to do. He didn't reassure her. And he didn't take the document with him when she left. The paper remained on the table, waiting. Within 48 hours, the palace's internal financial review office reportedly received new instructions. They didn't come through Camilla's household. They came through the king's private secretary and were directed to the keeper of the privy purse, the senior official responsible for royal household finances. The request was carefully worded. A comprehensive review of expenditure connected to the Queen Consort's office over the previous 3 years. The official reportedly understood immediately that this was not routine. He asked 2 questions. How broad was the review? And who else had been informed? The second answer was the one that mattered. William had been included from the beginning. He wasn't merely informed afterward. He wasn't simply briefed as the heir apparent. He was reportedly part of the process that produced the instructions. His office was copied. His name appeared within the authorization chain. And that placed him in a position that, according to the story, was highly unusual for a matter involving the Queen Consort's household. The legal side was handled just as carefully. Senior counsel was reportedly asked to advise rather than investigate. That distinction mattered. An investigation suggests that a conclusion is being pursued. Advice suggests that the institution wants to understand exactly what it can and cannot do. The legal advice was reportedly clear. The management of royal household finances fell within the sovereign's discretion. No external body needed to become involved. No public process was required. The palace could handle the matter internally. And by then, the machinery was already moving. But William still hadn't shown Camilla the full extent of what had been assembled. That confrontation was still coming. And when it finally happened, it would be very different from the private conversation between Charles and Camilla. The changes began quietly. That's how the most consequential changes inside institutions often begin. Not with announcements. Not with press conferences. Not with dramatic statements. But with small details. Camilla's engagement diary was reportedly the first visible sign. 3 appearances scheduled over the following 2 weeks were removed, and a ceremony where she had been expected to represent the crown. Each was described as a scheduling conflict, but none was rescheduled, and palace staff understood the difference. A scheduling conflict that produces no new date isn't really a scheduling conflict. It's a removal. Then 2 members of Camilla's household office were reportedly reassigned. Their desks were cleared over a weekend. Their building access was adjusted, and colleagues were given only vague explanations about their new roles. At the same time, the language surrounding Camilla's patronages reportedly began changing. Descriptions that once presented her as an active, current figure were softened. Present tense became past tense. Ongoing became historical. Small changes. Easy to miss. But inside an institution built on symbolism, small changes can say more than official announcements. Then came the financial hold. A letter from the keeper of the privy purse reportedly placed an administrative hold on accounts associated with Camilla's household operations. Technically, it wasn't described as a legal freeze. But in practical terms, the effect was almost the same. The accounts used for staffing, travel, and day-to-day household operations could no longer be accessed without additional authorization. And according to the story, that authorization now came from William's office. Then came the meeting everyone had been waiting for. William asked to see Camilla directly. No intermediary. No carefully managed protocol. No documents placed dramatically on the table. Camilla was already in the room when he arrived. She didn't stand. She remained seated beside the window, with the length of the room between them. William sat opposite her. He brought nothing with him. No files. No documents. No visible evidence of the weeks of work that had led to this moment. That absence was deliberate, because what he wanted to say, according to the story, wasn't about paperwork. It was personal. William told her that he hadn't asked to meet to revisit the evidence or impose another institutional consequence. He had asked to speak with her because there was something he needed her to understand. Something that no memo could explain. Something beneath the institution itself. He spoke about silence. About the kind of silence he remembered from childhood. Not the obvious silence of conflict. Something quieter. The silence of someone who had learned that the institutions around her might not amplify her voice, no matter how much she needed them to. The silence of someone who understood that protection could be conditional without anyone ever saying so directly. And the burden of carrying that knowledge alone. William made it clear that he wasn't saying the situations were identical, but he had watched what silence protected, and he had watched what that same silence cost. At some point, he decided he wasn't willing to continue it simply because continuing it was easier. Camilla didn't respond immediately, and when she finally did, whatever she said remained inside that room. William never repeated it. Neither did she. But when the meeting ended, something had changed. It wasn't exactly reconciliation. It wasn't exactly resolution. It was something more honest. A recognition of what had always existed between them, finally spoken aloud without demanding that either person do anything more about it. William left first. Camilla remained by the window. And outside, the palace continued moving as though nothing unusual had happened. But the story was already leaving the palace walls. The first report appeared on a Thursday morning. Not in a tabloid. Not as an anonymous gossip item. It appeared in the financial pages of a major newspaper. The report was carefully written. Only 3 paragraphs. No names. No accusations. No dramatic language. It described an administrative hold on accounts associated with a senior member of the royal household, pending an internal review authorized at the level of the heir apparent's office. 3 paragraphs were enough. By 1 o'clock, the story had spread across major British media outlets. And the reason wasn't the wording. It was what the wording implied. A financial hold. A senior royal household. Authorization from the heir apparent. The gaps between those phrases weren't gaps at all. They were the story. Constitutional experts were contacted. Some argued that the development demonstrated that the monarchy was capable of regulating itself from within. Others saw something much more significant. They pointed out that authority over a matter involving the Queen Consort appeared to have moved beyond the traditional boundaries people expected. And then Andrew Parker BS's name entered the conversation. Someone connected the private meeting to the financial review. The connection spread rapidly online. Within hours, Andrew's name was being searched alongside the story. Suddenly, the public wanted answers. But what had he known? And how long had he known it? The palace responded with a single sentence. The household would not comment on private financial matters. That was it. But the silence itself became part of the story. Because by then, the palace no longer appeared to control the narrative. The narrative was controlling the palace. And then came the event that would make the entire situation visible without a single official announcement. A national commemoration that had been scheduled months earlier. An event the royal family couldn't easily cancel without creating another story. The question was no longer whether Camilla would attend. It was what her appearance would look like. And every detail mattered. The cars arrived separately. Photographers noticed immediately. To the average viewer, it might have looked completely ordinary. But royal protocol is built around details. Who travels with whom? Which vehicle arrives first? Who enters beside whom? These decisions are rarely accidental. Inside the church, the seating arrangement made the message even clearer. Charles and Camilla were seated in the same row. But there was a space between them, a space that normally would have disappeared naturally as the row filled. It didn't. Nobody filled it. The gap appeared in photographs. It appeared in video footage. And by the following morning, it was impossible to ignore. William sat several rows forward with Catherine. He didn't look back. He remained focused on the service, composed and distant from the atmosphere behind him. Catherine remained beside him, calm and controlled. But the photograph that spread most widely wasn't a confrontation. It was an image of the royal seating area during the final hymn. And right in the middle of the frame was that empty space between Charles and Camilla. Two pairs of hands rested on either side. Neither reached across. Neither moved away. The camera simply captured the distance. And the public interpreted it immediately. Camilla left before the formal recession had concluded. Her security detail was reportedly smaller than usual. Her vehicle and exit route were also different. To most people, those details would mean nothing. Inside the institution, however, they represented something else. A recalibration. A change in how her position was being assessed. The car disappeared. The service continued. And the photograph kept spreading. The palace never formally announced what had changed. Instead, the change appeared through small details. The kind that gradually become a new reality. Camilla moved to a country residence outside the immediate orbit of the working household. No official statement described it as a punishment. No announcement explained what it meant. It simply happened. Her patronages continued to list her name. But invitations became less frequent. Then they stopped. Organizations quietly adjusted. Correspondence was redirected. Programs changed. And nobody wanted to say anything that might force the palace to respond. Charles continued with his public schedule. His speeches. His engagements. His correspondence. His ceremonial duties. Everything continued. But those closest to him reportedly noticed a subtle difference. The energy he once brought to private conversations was diminished. Not gone. Just diminished. William, meanwhile, never publicly discussed the situation. He didn't have to. The authority he now carried wasn't the authority of someone who had won an argument. It was something quieter, more durable. The authority of someone who had faced a costly decision and refused to move. That kind of authority doesn't need to announce itself. People simply adjust to it. And eventually, the adjustment becomes the new reality. Andrew Parker BS was never publicly tied to the consequences in any official way. His name remained in circulation for several weeks. Then the coverage moved on. The headlines changed. The public found something else to discuss. And Andrew returned to the background from which he had emerged. But what remained inside the palace was harder to define. It wasn't exactly a rupture. And it wasn't exactly a resolution. It was the strange condition that exists when something has finally been said that can never be unsaid. A family now forced to build whatever comes next on ground that had permanently shifted beneath them. The palace doors didn't close behind Camilla. They simply opened less often. And perhaps that was the most telling part of the entire story. Because in the quiet spaces where the royal family has always carried its most difficult moments, that distinction may have mattered less than anyone imagined, and more than anyone was prepared to say.